Welcome everyone to the new Indian Express's weekly video series, Global Express. This is where we look at developments in our neighborhood and beyond, how it impacts India, the emerging power in the Indian Ocean region and the Indo-Pacific. Do click on the new Indian Express website and tweet and follow Global Express. Today's focus, as we look east at Bangladesh and ask whether it is, look at its potential to be India's and the world's counter to China. We take a very long and hard look at Bangladesh Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, who's been invited as a special guest by Prime Minister Narendra Modi for the upcoming G20 in September. She's India's friend. Delhi's gesture, I think, to accept the UN ruling on the maritime boundary with Bangladesh, the law of the seas, I think won a lot of brownie points in Bangladesh when seen against China's aggressive moves in the South China Sea and the Indo-Pacific. But she does seem to be battling, many say, moves to scupper her bid for her fourth consecutive term as Prime Minister. She's been visiting the UK, the US, Japan, where she's addressed the charges of poll rigging and so on head on. And more recently, I think it was a couple of days ago or yesterday, she, the violence over this bipole, has where they initiated the Bangladesh government initiated a meeting with 13 ambassadors is also interesting. So I think the developments within Bangladesh and now to examine, I suppose, the transformation of Bangladesh into one of the key cogs in the US wheel against China. With us are three stellar guests. Saber Hossain Chowdhury, Special Envoy to the Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina on climate change, one of Bangladesh's smartest young politicians. He's also chair of the Parliamentary Committee on the Ministry of Environment, Forests and Climate Change. Welcome to the program, Mr. Chowdhury. And also on the show is India's former High Commissioner to Dhaka, Ms. Riva Ganguly. She's served in Dhaka twice. She's served in two important financial capitals, New York and Shanghai, and closely handled Nepal as well, and held a number of posts overseeing climate change, chemical weapons, non-proliferation, disarmament, and is currently on the Governing Council of Asian Confluence, a think tank based in Shillong. Welcome, Ambassador Das. Let me also welcome Professor Dr. Sreeradha Datta, Senior Fellow at the Jindal School of International Affairs and the Institute of South Asian Studies at the National University of Singapore. And needless to add, an expert on Bangladesh, Southeast Asia, and Myanmar. Welcome, Professor Datta. So let's start with you, Minister Saber Chowdhury. Prime Minister Hasina, as we said, is on the verge of making history if she wins a fourth term in January 2024. How do you see her track record as Prime Minister over the last 3 terms? Was she able to lift Bangladesh out of poverty, provide stability, empower women, provide inclusive growth? I understand that even the ordinary rickshaw puller now earns anything between 25,000 and 30,000 takas a month. But my point is there a sense of fatigue? Why would people entrust her with that task again? Is it a question of a known entity over the track record of the previous BNP government, of Khaleda Zia, where they say her sons literally ran the show? And the other bit about why is the West trying to scupper her chances, at all?
Thank you. Thank you, Neena. Thank you for the invitation. And it's wonderful to be with you. And also, of course, the former very engaged High Commissioner, Riva in Dhaka. And of course, we have Sreeradha. So you have a number of questions there. Let me take the first question in terms of the performance of Sheikh Hasina and the track record. When Bangladesh, or right after Bangladesh became independent, it was referred to by, I believe, Henry Kissinger as a bottomless basket. And now it's viewed and it's respected as a role model for development. I can roll off a lot of statistics. I will not go into that. But it has been an amazing turnaround for a country that had been written off, a country that was probably likely to be a failed state. So in all of the areas that you've mentioned, not just economic growth, which has been spectacular. I think if you look at the last 10 years, for example, the GDP has actually increased by 200%, 200% in 10 years. And we have already attained the requisite qualification to graduate out of LDC. We are aspiring to be a middle income country by 2041. And all over the course of 14, 15 years. And of course, this also has been a challenging period. The global stage has a lot of uncertainties, whether it is climate change or disasters, the frequency, intensity. So despite all of that, she has actually made Bangladesh now a role model in development. And when you say,
so it's no longer a basket case. It's no longer a basket. It hasn't been one for a long time, I think.
Hasn't been one for a long time. And, we are a good global citizen, whether it be peacekeeping, whether it be the lessons in terms of resilience, how we have adapted to climate change, even lending out assistance to other countries. We are secure when it comes to food. We are no longer a deficit country. You have talked about women's empowerment, and that's not just economic, that's social and political. If you look at our performance when it comes to health and education, it has been remarkable. So in every possible indicator, Bangladesh has really excelled. And in terms of whether there is fatigue, I don't think there is fatigue for progress. I don't think there is fatigue for development. And that is really what I think the next term is going to be about. And precisely because the Awami League has been in government for 3 consecutive terms, there has been a continuity in policy. The thrust areas have remained as thrust areas. We have seen, if you look at the history of Bangladesh, and especially the period 1991 and then 1996 and 2001, power basically alternated between the Awami League and the BNP. And what we saw was that with the change in government, there was a complete change in policy, even a U-turn in policy. So I think one of the reasons why Bangladesh is where it is today, other than, of course, the visionary leadership aspect that you talked about, and the fact that the people identified with that vision. It's not enough for a particular individual to have a vision. I mean, you must be able to translate that vision into the aspirations of the people for whom that vision is supposed to deliver. So I think that connection has been made. And so Bangladesh is really at a phase where I think people are expecting far greater things, one of the fastest growing economies.
Yeah, Mr. Chowdhury.
Yes.
Yeah, Mr. Chowdhury, there were very serious charges in the last election that it was rigged, and now there are sanctions against this rapid battalion force, which is supposed to be a group within the army. But the fact is that the BNP also boycotted that election, and because it did, it sort of took away the legitimacy of that poll. So would it be a good move to bring the BNP back into the game by in a sense, whether they win or lose or whatever the seats they win is not really the issue. The fact is, if they participate, then it gives the poll a lot of legitimacy. Is that why the West is putting so much pressure on your government?
Let me just correct, because there might be a wrong perception. The Awami League never objected to the BNP taking part in the elections. It was a call of the BNP. So if a political party voluntarily decides to disengage with the political process, the responsibility for that does not lie on the party and government.
That's true.
And democracy, it takes 2 to tango. You boycott a poll and then say it's rigged. Well, how would you know whether it's rigged or not if you haven't actually engaged and taken part? And the Awami League in the past and even today, with the upcoming election, it has actually called upon all parties to take part. And I don't really want to comment on what other countries do, other than to say that it is the people of Bangladesh who will decide. Who forms the next government in Bangladesh is a sovereign choice of the people of Bangladesh. If the people of Bangladesh, despite all the developments that we have spoken and talked about, say that they don't like the Awami League and they exercise their franchise accordingly, I think Awami League will bow to the majesty of democracy and accept the results. I mean, that's very clear. So if the BNP takes part, and I think, it's not the government, it's the election commission which runs the elections. And if you look at, recent elections that have taken place, they have been largely peaceful. There has been no particular issues. You have talked about the recent by-election in Dhaka.
Yeah, where there was, that man was beaten up.
That was a very unfortunate incident with a candidate. And the people, regardless of their political affiliation, have been arrested. So it is not that there is a culture of, let's say that, you can do and get away with whatever you want. So the rule of law has taken place. And you will have one or two instances in elections. What is important is not that there are attempts to circumvent it, but whether rule of law actually comes in and holds the perpetrators to account. So I think with the coming election, regardless of what certain countries may think, and in fact, if you look at the US position is that they share the commitment of the government to have free and fair polls. And so there is complete alignment. In fact, I, as a member of the Awami League, will actually insist that we have free and fair polls, because I also want to see whether I've done work over the last 5 years that meets the expectations of the people. So I think on that particular front, there is absolutely no reason to doubt. And again, just for the record, Reena, for those who may not be fully aware, we had a presidential system in Bangladesh.
Yes.
Even when after the elections in 1991. And it was the Awami League which actually, despite being in opposition, forced the hand of the government to resort to a parliamentary system. And we have that system now in place. No system is perfect, and it takes a while. If you compare what is the status of democracy in Bangladesh with countries that have been practicing it for 800, 1,000 years, you will not get the same result. But I think it is, that is the aspiration of the people. That is what the Constitution says. And we will have elections exactly as per the terms and conditions laid out in our Constitution.
So if I could turn to Professor Datta, I would like to ask, why is the West uncomfortable with a vibrant democracy like Bangladesh? What is it that makes them, put pressure and say that, that the elections are rigged, and that we should bring back Khaleda Zia's son Tariq, who's taken refuge in UK, even though there are tons of corruption cases against him? There are reports of, moves to rehabilitate the Jamaat-e-Islami, which in India we feel is no more than a proxy for Pakistan, and by extension a proxy for China. So what do you see happening, Professor Datta, since you cover this, and is there a backroom deal to bring the BNP in?
Let me begin with the fact that you talked about it being a vibrant democracy. It's a vibrant nation, it's a vibrant country, no doubt about that. But its democracy was always fragile. I think I wrote about that in 2000, and I still maintain that democratic norms were always pretty fragile and questionable, which is still the case, which is why I think we talk about not only the US pressure. Look at the kind of statements that's coming through EU and other, Amnesty, UN, everyone at that by-election. So we discussed a little bit, Saber Bhai spoke about how in 2004, 2014, that BNP didn't agree to come to the polls. Yes, absolutely. And what can any party do about that? But BNP didn't agree to the polls because they believed the political environment was not conducive enough for them to participate in the polls. We've always seen that, and this is not necessarily only for this particular government, it's also true for earlier, that Bangladesh has always had a lack of independent institutions. There has always been an extremely overreach by the executive, which continues to be. It was a tradition which has continued, and this particular government, and I completely agree with the kind of points that you made and Saber Bhai did about how the kinds of milestones Bangladesh has achieved from what it was in the 72 and how it's done. It's fabulous, stupendous,
it is one of the most successful,
the growth story and everything. But
in South Asia.
Yes, but what we've seen in the 2014 elections, they didn't win because they didn't participate because they said it was not politically conducive environment. They didn't think that under this particular government, the polls would be free and fair. We go back to 2018, the next round of elections, where they wanted to participate. But of course. But we also know that on the poll day morning, people were not even allowed to go to the poll and cast their vote because the ballot boxes were filled before. I mean, now it's all open domain knowledge. It's not a secret anymore. So, they got numbers which is completely outlandish. And now, of course, and, there's a little bit of background to this. As I said, I've often argued this, and in India, irrespective of government, our election commission is so strong that the people and every political party has faith in them. That's not the case with Bangladesh. So Bangladesh used to have, because of this very, very deep divisiveness between the political parties, a system called caretaker government, which essentially was a technocrat-led government for 3 months, who was their only job was to assist the election commission to hold free and fair election.
So is that what we can see coming? Do you think Hasina will actually give in and allow something like that to happen?
From little that I know, she's been very clear that she's not agreeing to it, because she did take away. This was something that BNP didn't want and Awami didn't want, but then each one on the other side wanted it, and finally it became part of the, through amendment, was introduced through amendment into the constitution. And 2008 elections, which was held under caretaker government, was one of the best polls with a fabulous turnout and the kind of, numbers that Awami League is, of course, a point in history. But subsequently, she did away with that caretaker government. And it is on this sticky note that the political parties are not agreeing. Right now, Awami League says there is no reason why, under the present government, they can't come to elections. And BNP has been saying that no, we will not do that, because we know what is going to be the outcome if it's this particular government is in the elections are held under this government aegis. So that's something.
But also, does the BNP have a vote base? I know that the Hasina's party does. It is also very primarily very Islamist, and so therefore is seen, as sort of mirroring what the people want and so on. But with the BNP, given Tariq Zia's very spotty record.
Yes, I agree completely. And which is why I've constantly said that, I'm very surprised with the kind of 6 months development that I see in Bangladesh happening under this government. Because if there was free and fair elections, Awami League would win. There is no question about that. Because
so what are they afraid of?
They're afraid of it. They're not going to, that's exactly the point. So that, the 2018 election was eye-opener. All of us watched. This was an aghas. This is not something that should happen in Bangladesh, under the circumstances. And then in the last 6 months, the kind of, political persecution which is taking place, it's open. There is no, they're not even trying to cover it up. I haven't seen, I go to Bangladesh very often, as, or most of you know, the kind of fear that I've seen in people, it's something which has never been seen before. I cover Bangladesh. I've been there for the last 25 years very regularly. But the kind of, how the governments come after activists, journalists, media houses, that's something which, we always know these things happen, but what they've done is a different level completely. And now, of course, there was a big story going on last time when I was here, which is a couple of months ago, as to how media houses are part of this whole narrative with the US in trying to remove Sheikh Hasina. I don't think that's the case at all. But also another point which has, been something which is rankling people is, again, apart from the political persecution, is that Bangladesh, because of corruption, has actually economically had a very deep slide in the last 6 months, which nobody wants to talk about it, but it's a fact. If you see the recent...
No, there are articles on it, which I've read.
Moody rankings and everything, has, I think everybody's pretty... So, these are the things, and it's pretty much there. Bangladesh is very proud of the kind of infrastructure they've done. It's fabulous. But if you just look at the Padma Bridge, which not the railway project which is being done by China, but even the road project, look at the numbers. The costing and the way it's gone up. In India, we are used to building so much of bridges. We know what costings are. It's just...
Which disappear too in the rain and the floods.
I'm just saying that, their corruption levels, again, people in Bangladesh, in South Asia, I think Bangladeshis are one of the most politically aware people. And coming to a point about how the percentage is, recently I wrote a op-ed for Telegraph where I talked about how there was about 35-40% vote strength for Awami and 35 so for BNP. That's been traditional. Now, again, thanks to this political persecution, no media houses have done an open poll, which used to be very regular at some point of time when we were growing up and watching Bangladesh. Now they're not allowed to do open polls, so that doesn't happen. I've had actually a lot of friends in Bangladesh call me immediately and say, once they read that you are getting your numbers wrong. Bangladesh BNP still has a lot of vote strength.
So if I can just bring in Ambassador Das. Ambassador, do you agree with with this narrative that the West is uncomfortable and is actually putting pressure on Hasina when actually Sheikh Hasina is the best bet that the Western powers have against China? I mean, China has repeatedly offered to invest in Bangladesh, and it does seem to be able to stand up to China. What do you have to say to that?
Thank you, Neena, first for inviting me for this discussion. It's wonderful to see an old friend, Saber Hossain Chowdhury, and of course, Sreeradha, where I keep meeting. You see, the West is always very interested in having standards and, their own standards, which they want to be imposed on everybody. So I think that's a very different narrative altogether, because we know that for everything on earth, the Western countries have their own standards, and they feel that everybody, no matter what your internal political situation, no matter what your compulsions, no matter what your culture, no matter what your unique identity, you have to follow and get into that box, and you have to be judged within that box. So, we in South Asia have our own very peculiar challenges. Bangladesh has not had, it's a very young nation. It's not had a very easy history. It has had years of military rule. It has had dictatorship. Assassinations, and history is very raw still. I mean, there are plenty of people out there who are still active, who have actually lived through the liberation war, and who've lived through the ups and downs of history thereafter. Coming to China, I think, again, since we're talking about history, it's important to remember on whose side China was in 71, and that it took them 5 years to actually establish diplomatic relations. Every veto that was used by China after it freshly entered the Security Council was to block Bangladesh's membership of the United Nations. So, it was only after Sheikh Mujibur Rahman was assassinated and an army government was there, military coup had taken place, that China felt comfortable enough to recognize Bangladesh.
Amazing.
So, this history should not be forgotten, and Bangladeshis are very intelligent, and I'm sure they remember this history, which is the beginning of the relationship. It's a different matter that after President Ziaur Rahman and then President Ershad, relations with China improved greatly, and I think 2016 visit of Xi Jinping was a very important visit in that sense. But if you see what was announced, I mean, during Xi Jinping's visit, $24 billion worth of projects were announced, and this very big number went around for a very long time. And as far as I know, till last year, only $7.8 billion worth of projects have actually been signed, which is all of 8 projects. And disbursements is in the range of $3 billion, a little more than $3 billion. So,
But they have built the Chittagong port, and they've given them 2 submarines. I mean, old, but they built a submarine base in Chittagong.
The Army's dependence on Chinese equipment started right after China recognized Bangladesh, and through the period when through the military dictatorship period, most of the equipment was, I mean, so even now China is Bangladesh is very dependent on Chinese equipment, though they're diversifying quite a bit. And it's very important to remember what the Bangladeshi finance minister himself said last year in an interview with Financial Times, that you have to be very careful when you take loans from China, because
the debt trap.
are not sustainable and they're not well thought through. So I think, we should remember all these things while discussing Bangladesh's relationship with China. Of course, there are some very big mega projects which are in our phase, but the 24 billion US dollar projects are nowhere in sight, certainly.
So, but basically China is trying to ring fence India. I mean, the fact that they have built relations with Nepal and Myanmar, they're trying, and with of course now Bangladesh, and this huge, I find the visit of the Japanese foreign minister to India and to the region very interesting, because Japan is built the other big port, the Matabari, and the economic zone. That I think that whole project shows is that Japan's investment in India and Bangladesh is also a move to counter China. I mean, they're not doing it out of the goodness of their hearts, right? I mean, it's basically because if they have a foothold in the Bay of Bengal, then it actually is also a way to stop China from expanding its footprint.
There's no doubt that, Bangladesh is extremely strategically located. And in today's world where, the focus of global contestation, if you say contestation, global geopolitics is shifting to the Indo-Pacific, Bangladesh's strategic location in the Bay of Bengal is extremely important. So, Bangladesh coming up with a policy on Indo-Pacific is also very important. That's where, Japan also is, as Shinzo Abe is widely considered as the person who really came up with the term. But we must also remember that, Bangladesh and India for that matter, we are some of the largest recipients of Japan's development assistance program, and not since yesterday, since many years, many years. And Bangladesh's largest aid donor is actually Japan. That's the largest. I'm not very sure about the figures. And of course, the Matarbari port and what we talk about, the trilateral. I'm very glad that, Asian Confluence, the think tank I am associated with, it is at our conference in Tripura, which was the third Indo-Japanese intellectual dialogue, that the idea of a trilateral between India, Bangladesh, and Japan came up. And, but this concept really involves a lot of participation by private sector industry. It is not a government heavy. The Matawari project is of course a JICA project, but the Big B project where we are looking at,
Yeah, I like this word, Big B.
So that is really a private sector driven project. And if you look at what India is doing in terms of its project, there is already a lot of connectivity projects with the Northeast. See, Northeast and what is Bangladesh.
So can we characterize it as a counter to the Belt and Road Initiative?
Absolutely not. I think it stands on its own 2 feet as a very, very substantive project. And,
it's not to block China's entry into the area.
See, it's in the northeast of India. It was very disproportionately affected by the partition. We seem to forget the fact that, partition has many aspects, the human aspects, the tragedy, the people who got displaced. But look at the Northeast. They lost all their traditional trade routes. And these trade routes were there since centuries. They lost access to ports. Today, thanks to the excellent, relationship that we have with Bangladesh, the tremendous political will that exists between our 2 prime ministers, that there is an access that Meghalaya, Assam, Tripura, we are actually talking about a logistics hub in Agartala and Sabroon. I mean, you could not even imagine thinking of these things, 4 or 5 years back. And it is not on the tabletop now. It is actually implemented. Dakhoda Agartala rail link is going to be inaugurated during Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina's visit to India. That's what I read.
Fantastic.
There are 3 passenger trains between our 2 countries. The railways are used for trade. Trade has boomed on railways by 120%. And there is much that the Northeast can gain from, Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina always publicly says that what I want is the re-establishment of the pre-1965 trade links between India and Bangladesh. So, the people-to-people contact, our history, it is very unique. It is, you just cannot compare it with the relationship that any other two countries have. I mean, I would say it is globally.
Now you sense that when you're in Dhaka also, the warmth that you get from the ordinary people is there. If I can just go back to Professor Datta, I just wanted to ask, I mean, the point is, yes, you have these wonderful linkages, but it also is a very porous border. That there is so much, not just infiltration, but also, arms, ammunition, people going back and forth. And now there's trouble in Manipur, which where they say the arms have come in from Myanmar. Is that also an issue? I mean, the linkages are also a potential threat to the stability of the Northeast.
Yes, of course. I mean, just to go back a little bit to what Ambassador Das talked about, this whole idea of sub-regionalism was actually mooted in SARC so many years ago. Is that we hadn't moved on it. And it was only when Sheikh Hasina came to power in 2009 that the cross-border facility started, and we were able to look at sub-region in a much more robust way. And, so this is really nothing to do with what was happening with the rest of the world. I think South Asia had a plan of its own. And South. So in fact, some time ago, I remember Sheikh Hasina mentioning that India is building this trilateral which is almost done with Myanmar and Thailand.
Exactly.
She was wanting to join that trilateral highway. So she also has been part of this, and in that whole particular the new cross-border realignment that's happening, I think they obviously been very strong, elements to that. Coming back to this point, yes, absolutely. And I think we've always seen it's about, smuggling of humans as well as, other banned commodities has been going on. And I think that's been another issue always at the borders. And thankfully, again, because of the way Prime Minister Hasina addressed the security concerns, that those were addressed, because we've seen whole lot of anti-Indian activities used to be happening from the Bangladeshi soil. Thanks to her, measures that those were addressed. But these elements, these negative areas, especially now in terms of the people's movement, the refugee movement, the politically persecuted, and the arms and the other negative, that's something that's worrisome for both. I think India's
Professor, also the emergence of the Rohingyas. I mean, the people who were appearing in, I believe, in all kinds of hill towns and things further to the west, closer to Delhi. And that's also worrying. That means there is nobody who's actually monitoring, the movement of these people.
Also,
the undocumented.
Borders are very difficult to monitor. We have border guards on both sides. We have the border security forces. Bangladesh had the BDG, but the problem here is of the terrain. Also one aspect, I don't know whether we've moved on it, and I remember it used to be flagged very often during the bilateral dialogues that used to be held very often between India and Bangladesh, about how India had always mooted for the fact that post dusk there should be no movement on both sides. Like Bangladeshis should not move, and so would Indians. Bangladesh, for whatever reason, never agreed to, because we know there's a lot of local population who virtually live in each other's kind of land. So that physical movement never stopped, and which is why we've seen, there has been border hostility, there has been violent incidents, and kind of things which hasn't gone down well with both sides. But of course, Bangladesh is very sensitive about that. But again, there are dialogues and mechanisms in place, but something what you're saying right now is very, very worrisome. I completely agree, and needs to be monitored far more deeply than it is at this point of time.
Yeah, if I can just go back to Saber, I just wanted to check. I mean, yes, Sheikh Hasina is extremely popular. Yes, the Awami League does have the confidence of the people. But if there is a change in government at all, if there's a limited, if she gets a limited mandate this time, I mean, may or may not, do you think that relations with the neighborhood, particularly India, will take a nosedive if there are other powers which come in, other parties that come in? Saber Sab.
You see, I mean, if you look at the policy, the foreign policy of Bangladesh, I mean, it's from the Bangabandhu times, it's friendship with all and malice towards none. I think that still is very much there. Of course, with India, it's a special relationship because we share such an extensive border. And of course, there are tensions, some tensions there. I mean, you know, when you have neighbors, there will be issues. But I think the important thing is the spirit that exists right at the top between the two honorable prime ministers. You know, the fact that they're able to talk each other and resolve issues. I think, you know, the border killings is, as Sreeradha mentioned, is still a very sensitive issue for Bangladesh. You know, we've always said that should come down to zero. So,
but you also have the T-star. You also have the T-star.
Yes.
T-star issue.
So there are also the other issues. So I think as long as the framework is in place, as long as that comfort level is there, and I think it's in the interest of both India and Bangladesh that the relationship be put on an irreversible trajectory. I think, you know, that is something that both Bangladesh and India agree, because it does give us opportunities to have win-win constructs. You know, it's not one side gains and the other loses. And I think that's really the strength and basis of the Indo-Bangla relations. Looking beyond that, you know, I think one of Sheikh Hasina's outstanding achievements has been that she has been able to be in good terms with all of the major powers of the world, economic powers, at the same time. So whether it be US, whether it be Russia, whether it be Japan, EU, India, of course, even China. So she has maintained that. And I think that is to her great credit that she has been able to do that. And all
the
of
sanctions, the sanctions that the US has imposed doesn't worry you?
The sanction is not really to do with elections, it's to do with RAB, a paramilitary force which the US and the Brits and the others trained. Of course, there are issues there, you know, and those have to be addressed. I don't think anyone is moving away from that. To go to Sreeradha's point, yes, there are certain issues with our Digital Security Act, which the media is not comfortable with, but the law minister has said that this is something that we are going to revisit, and, you know, we will address those. Polling, there is actually, Sreeradha, constant polling. If you look at Prothomalo, which is the largest circulated Bangla daily, every day they're carrying 3 or 4 polls. So I think what I would say is there is room for improvement. And the point is that Bangladesh acknowledges that. And, you know, in the greater context, of course, the Indian Ocean region, I think that's really where the focus is. And its importance in terms of, you know, the waterways, whether it's the Suez Canal, whether it's the Strait of Hormuz or the Strait of Malacca, the population, the contribution of GDP. And, you know, Bangladesh is right in the center of that. So, I mean,
bang slap in the middle.
Yeah, I mean, we are in the middle, but I think we are also trying to leverage that. You know, I think the recent announcements in terms of what our policy is going to be on the Indo-Pacific, you know, in terms of peace, prosperity, partnerships, and a resilient IOR, you know, that's what Bangladesh is promoting, and a rules-based and a free and an inclusive Indo-Pacific. So I don't see any major issues there. I think China, when you talk about it, you know, it's not when we engage with China or with anyone else, we have to look at the projects very carefully, that they are in the interest of Bangladesh. So it's not China specific. You know, any project that comes has to be in the interest of Bangladesh. And I think the position that we have taken is that we are pro-Bangladesh, you know, and that is what guides our policy. So if it is in our interest to be aligned in a particular way, in a specific context, we'll do that as long as we are pro-Bangladesh. And I think that India is also very fine with, because India will always be pro-India, we will be pro-Bangladesh, and yet we'll be able to find win-win constructs. In terms of what happens, you know, I don't want to prejudge or preempt the right of the people to vote, but I think it is true that Indo-Bangla relations are extremely constructive. You know, it is moving forward, whether it be at the people-to-people level or the government level, even the political party level. I think there is a broad understanding that this can be a win-win. And, you know, South Asia is the last region, if you like, to be connected. You know, all of the other parts of the world have been connected. And I think all of the South Asian countries have a great opportunity there. In the case of Bangladesh, and if you look at our position, Bangladesh is where South Asia ends and where ASEAN begins.
Exactly.
So also in context of South Asia, ASEAN cooperation, which I think is going to be very important as we move forward, you know, intra-Asia will have a larger context. Bangladesh can play a very important role. So we are the bridge between South Asia and ASEAN. So it is absolutely critical that the development trajectory that Bangladesh is on, that continues. For that, you need to have stability. You need to have continuity of policy. And I hope come the next election, the people of Bangladesh will acknowledge that and cast their votes accordingly.
Thank you very much. Ambassador, if I can just end with you, would India, look at this whole development in Bangladesh, in a partisan manner, in the sense, would they fight for Sheikh Hasina, and the fact that she is the last bulwark against China in the region?
Well, India does not conduct its foreign policy like that. As Mr. Chowdhury just explained, about the election process, Bangladesh has its own rules and regulations. There are laws in place on conduct of elections. And
that's fine, but does it still see Bangladesh under Sheikh Hasina as the bulwark against China?
You see, India,
India's foreign policy.
Definitely the last 10 years have seen, I'll be repeating myself about what I said earlier, that, India-Bangladesh relations are extremely unique in the sense, and especially since Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina came to power. And I think two very important things happened politically, which have really set the tone of the relationship, and they stand on their own merit. And these two things are, first, the action that was taken by Bangladesh against the insurgents, northeastern insurgents. Yes. And our own home ministry, reports say that, the last few years, we have seen the least amount of insurgency activity in our history in the northeast. Secondly is the land boundary agreement. Just because it was successful, we should not forget what we achieved through the land boundary agreement. I think no two countries have done such a massive exchange of land. And if you remember correctly, within India, there was complete non-partisan support to the land boundary agreement. The constitutional amendment was passed unanimously. And India lost a little bit of land, but a huge irritant was taken out of our relationship.
That's true.
The boundary has been demarcated, the enclaves are gone, the human suffering of the people are gone. So let's not forget that these two very important political action on part of our leaders who enjoy very good relationship has set the tone of the relationship. Now the relationship today is at a stage where, from both sides, there are a lot of interest. There are a lot of stakeholders in our relationship. Business is doing well, exports are increasing, imports are increasing. Bangladeshi businessmen want to invest in India. India has investments in Bangladesh. Bangladesh is soon going to, graduate to developing country status from enlistee status, while retaining some of its tariff advantages on which Bangladesh has got into, individual agreements with many countries. So I think the economic growth, development, and the positivity in our relationship is pretty irreversible. People, especially young people, having served in Bangladesh twice, I can see the difference in opinion of young people from 1999 to 2000 when I was there to now, where the young people really want to take advantage of India's proximity, of our phenomenal economic growth and what is happening in India. So I think the relationship is on track and will remain on track, and it is irreversible. I don't think it is at a stage where it will see a setback. Because it's grown roots now, and these are and stakeholders from both sides are very much invested in the relationship. I mean, I'm not talking only about political parties and governments. There are many stakeholders who are invested in the relationship.
If I can just sum up, Professor Das, so where do you see the next few months? What do you see a smooth run to the election? Do you see, or do you see a little trouble coming up?
Neena, can I just make one quick point?
Sure.
I think every time you have elections in a South Asian country, there's a lot of interest, not just in the country itself, region, globally. I think what we really need to look at in context of Bangladesh is when someone is complaining about the process or unfairness or whatever, the fundamental point is, are we willing to accept the results of the election? Because if our stance is going to be based on, if I win in the election, then it is free and fair. If I lose, it has been rigged. We need to come out of that psyche. We need to come out of that mentality. And here I will say, and this is a matter of historic record, the Awami League is the only party which, after having lost an election, actually handed over power as per the constitution. That happened in 2001. So we have that record. That's the pedigree of the Awami League.
Yeah.
This is not the perfect party. We have issues, we have challenges, but this is what history says. Unlike any other political party, I don't want to name any party because I want to be respectful to all. No, in Bangladesh, no one has actually handed over.
Your Sheikh Mujib's inheritors.
Yes, we have a greater responsibility. We don't claim to be the absolute monopoly on the independence of Bangladesh, but we did inspire that movement. We did lead that movement. And in many respects, the Awami League is similar to the ANC in South Africa. It is similar to the Congress in India because we gave leadership to our independence movements. So that is a historic responsibility that we are very much aware of. And I'm sure come the next elections, we will uphold the rights of the people and the citizens of Bangladesh in a free, fair, and inclusive process.
Anyway, I'm running out of time. So last summing up to you, Professor, please come in.
We just really, I think, just in the words of Saber Bhai, that's true, that free, fair elections is all that one wants, inclusive, multi-party. We want to see Bangladesh as a vibrant democracy. It's a fascinating nation. So we are hoping that it's going to be like that. And I'm hoping Saber Bhai's words are going to be exactly how the outcome is. We look forward to a very, very positive journey till the elections are held. We're looking forward to that, yes.
Thank you very much, Professor Datta. Thank you, Ambassador Das. Yeah. And thank you, Saber Bhai. It was a pleasure having all three on my show. Really good. Thanks very much. Thank you very much.
So much. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Please do click on the new Indian Express icon and watch Global Express. Thank you, viewers.